Welcome to the Business Mechanics Show. I'm your host, Vaughn Sigmund, the co-founder of Results Driven Leadership. We provide the knowledge, skills, and tools you need to advance your career and your business success. Whether you're just getting started or you've been running a business for years, we've got the advice and tips that will help you stay ahead of the competition. And I'm joined today by my cohort, Eric Van Doren. Say hello, Eric.
Hello, Vaughn. Hello, world. How are you guys doing?
Love your enthusiasm, Eric, so much. So today's topic is back to my intro there. This is some of the best advice you're ever going to get from the Business Mechanics Show. It's an entree to a new course I just developed over the past couple weeks. I'll be putting it onto the website shortly. We've got to get some video shot and that sort of thing, but I can't believe it's taken me this long to put this together. This is like a head slapper. Why haven't I had this in here? Because it's, as you and I spoke earlier last week, how if you don't have this right, you're probably not going to get anything right. And, Eric, I was thinking about your career. You and I have done such similar things in the past, but I mean, our careers were 100% based on how well we train people. Whether it was employees, whether it was managers, whether it was regional managers, trained ourselves sometimes, but we were going to be dead in the water if we couldn't train people. And I think it came fairly naturally. I got trained to train. You went through train the trainer courses early in your career too, didn't you, Eric?
Absolutely essential. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just unfortunately, so many managers and business owners have just not been accessed this type of information. So really super important information is you've got to learn exactly how to train employees, because Eric and I see it conducted so poorly so many times. And back to our careers, Eric, if one of these days I'm going to go back and try to figure this out to see how many stores or locations I've opened in my career. It's got to be in the high hundreds. You have any idea how many new locations you've opened in your career of retail?
Yeah, I mean, ever since I've been a child, we were opening stores, opening locations, pop-up kind of locations, they call it today, but we would call it just a bargain truck out in front and hiring people and training people to do what they needed to do. And also, obviously, in my other world, opening new stores and moving stores. And listen, it's all about getting people trained, not quickly, but the right way. So it's imperative.
Yeah, and I love what you just said, the right way, because we see it done the wrong way so often, especially the aftermath of the wrong way or ineffectively. Sure. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about the 4 tenets of teaching, the exact way you need to be delivering training, certainly some of the downsides, if you may have some of these signs, if you're not training very well, and most importantly, how to train new employees. I think we'll get through all that today. There's a bunch more in the course, but we'll get through at least that much today. But, it's an essential part of your organization's success. You don't get this right, you're not going to get much else in line. You can even hire the greatest people on the planet. If you don't train them properly, they're going to be ineffective, or they're not going to last long, or they're just going to do a really poor job for you. So you can have best product and processes in the world. If you got somebody that's ill-trained delivering that product or process, you're cooked. So Eric, I'm going to bring you into some of these discussions.
Sure.
But the point of the matter is everybody thinks they're training people, but very few people have learned how to train. And you've been through train the trainer classes, correct?
I have, yes. On a couple of different occasions at a decade apart, but yes, I have. Absolutely. It's foundational.
Well, and I'll never forget my first train the trainer class. And maybe that's what set me up for the level of success I had in my career, because it was ingrained in my 20s of how important not only training was, but how to deliver training properly. And I think because I was so focused on on good training protocols and making it a high priority for the folks that I worked with, and trained a lot of people how to properly train based on I think it was about a day and a half course in Portland, Maine, with bass shoes. I was so lucky to have Dan Reardon as a boss back then, who really believed in that sort of thing. But that's where I got my chops on how to train people. Where did you learn, Eric? Who originally taught you how to train?
As crazy as that may sound, I know we passed in the night with our careers. Never did see you, but I've heard of you before. But at the same place before they closed down the shop in Portland, Maine, I did the same thing at the beginning as a manager before I was even in a supervisor role when I was in my low 20s. And it made sense. It was simple in the approach to me, and it allowed me to see clearly that I just can't tell people what to do. There's more to that.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. There's a process to it.
Yeah.
If you don't have any access to the process or been taught the process, you're just going to wing it, right? And a lot of companies and a lot of managers do wing it, but it's really important to understand how people learn too, right?
Absolutely.
Because we don't always take all that into account. So we're going to get into all that over the next hour or so. We're going to talk about the training process, the do's and don'ts. We're going to talk about some of the signs that you may see on your team or in your organization if you're not as effective as you could be or completely ineffective in your training process. And through no guilt, if you haven't had the benefit that Eric and I had early in our careers to know how to do this, how the hell were you supposed to know how to do it? This just isn't something that is readily accessible. Somebody's got to teach you how to do it. We were lucky. You're listening to this podcast probably because you haven't been exposed to this. So we're gonna share what we've learned, what we practiced for decades that we know works, and we're going to focus a little bit in depth on new employees because that's really where the wheels come off with so many new hires and turnover and that sort of thing. So anyway, training is only effective when it's done right. If you don't have the right protocols, if you have ineffective protocols, you can have a range of negative impacts. And it may be just something you've learned to be accustomed to, live with, things like high turnover. Studies have found that employees that receive inadequate training are most likely to leave their jobs. So that's according to SHRM, which I'm a member of, or the Society for Human Resource Management. It can cost up to 50 to 60% of an employee's annual salary to replace them. So turnover is no bueno.
Yeah.
And certainly improper training approaches creates decreased productivity. You're just never going to get what you need out of your employees if they don't know how to do their jobs completely. The American Society of Training and Development found that companies that invest in employees, think about this for a second. This is a pretty important statistic. The companies that invest in employee training and development have a 218% higher income per employee.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Had you ever heard that before?
I have actually. I didn't hear that actual number. I knew it was, double digit or triple digits. And the pure fact is it can damage a lot of things, morale. It can, as you said, the productivity piece, the morale of what you're doing, your customer, how they see your product and your brand.
Yep. Yep. I mean, but think about that one payoff, that one ROI. You get really good at training, and you're likely to have a 218% higher income per employee, 218% income improvement per employee than your competition. And, I work with several manufacturers, and workplace accidents is a real thing. Workplace errors, I work with one aerospace company, as I've helped them dial in their training protocols, their training department, their managers on the elements of training, they've seen productivity go through the roof. Same employees. But so you can reduce your errors, you can reduce your accidents. And in fact, speaking of accidents, according to a study by OSHA, inadequate training is one of the leading causes of workplace accidents because they just don't know what they don't know. And somebody's got to teach it and ingrain it and make sure they retain it. Ooh, I just rhymed. You like that?
I love it. I got some more rhymes for you
Okay.
a little later on.
Keep them till later, will you?
Yeah.
Or customer service. Think about that. If you're not properly training your folks, that's going to be seen and experienced by your customers too. If you're not surveying your customers, which I encourage every one of my clients to create a regular customer survey so that they can tell you how you're doing. And very often the reason why they're not doing well, they see their customer service scores slipping, is inadequate training. In fact, a Price Waterhouse Cooper survey show that 1 in 3 customers will leave a brand they love after just one bad experience. So 30%, 33%
Yeah,
will
33.
leave you, even if they love you, if you give them a bad experience. So they're not very loyal, not for long. Employee engagement, Eric, we talk about that all the time, but it's one of the most essential parts of keeping people happy in the job is keeping them engaged, and training is the number one way. And having a really good leader, having somebody that relates well to their employees. But only get this, Gallup is one of my favorite sources of statistics when it comes to this sort of thing because they're the biggest.
Yeah.
But according to Gallup, only 13% of employees worldwide are engaged.
What?
13%, Eric.
Wow.
That blows me away.
That is.
And it blew me away when it was only 30%. It's down to 13%. Unbelievable. So let's get into the meat of this. How do you make sure you're using the exact methods of training? Let's start right here.
Yeah.
1, you've got to understand the learning process. And we're going to talk about the 4 tenets of teaching. But before we dive into that, you've got to understand the learning process. It's complex, which certainly includes acquiring knowledge, skills, values. There's several stages that everyone goes through. Attention, that's one of the stages. The learner must be attentive and engaged. And I always wonder, when we have somebody that's not attentive or engaged, one of 2 things are happening. We're either delivering boring training with the wrong person who may know too much about whatever the topic of the training is, but also have you hired the right person? And if you're not using DISC as part of your hiring process, let's talk about that. And if you don't know what DISC is, an assessment. It's behavioral assessment that measures your prospective or current employees' personality traits and behavior styles. And it's based on the DISC model, which is 4 primary styles: dominance, influence, steadiness, conscientiousness. And it's just a series of questions. It just takes a few minutes to complete. And the participants respond to a few statements in there, questions, and the questions are designed to identify the individual's dominant behavior, provide insights into things like their communication style, decision-making, their work style. And the results of this assessment are then given to you in a report, a multi-page report, between 30 and 72 pages, depending on which one you take. And it also includes tips for communicating both to this person and for that person to communicate with others, and strategies to leverage their strengths and to overcome their weaknesses. They're very commonly used in the workplace for benchmarking, for hiring. And if you haven't taken a DISC assessment for yourself and see the value of one of these fabulous assessments, in the show notes, I'm going to give you a link to a free DISC assessment for yourself. Check it out. Take it. Again, it takes no more than 15 minutes to complete. And that link's right in the show notes. Click on it, take it, and then we will go over it. Probably Eric.
Yep.
He's the expert on this. Eric will go over it with you so that you can clearly understand all the important information it provides, because it's a lot of information. So Eric, you ready to do about another 500 of these?
I would love to. I did quite a few last week, and each time we do these, the client is always like, wow, I thought that's what I am. And yep, you are. It doesn't lie.
Yeah, and they're so accurate. Everybody's always so blown away by how accurate they are.
Really, they are.
Yeah. And even when they think they're inaccurate, when they're dealing with somebody that's a fairly high level expert like you and me and discussing it, we can always explain to them, no, it's accurate. And then they almost always agree.
Yeah.
So back to the elements of training. So proper training, retention, your retention of knowledge, in this case, not retention versus turnover, it's retention of knowledge. How are they going to retain this information? We're going to get into some of the do's and don'ts on that. And then how are they going to reproduce what they've learned? They've got to be able to turn around and do it. And then they've got to be motivated. They've got to be enthusiastic. And again, that may come back to either the manager, the trainer, or hiring the wrong person. You want to make sure you have all those elements in place. And in fact, DISC will tell you whether you've got the right person training or not. You've got to have somebody that is going to have the empathy, the patience, is willing to be a team spirited or team approach person. And there's a certain DISC behavior style that is a keen indicator as to whether somebody's going to do that or they're going to rush through it.
Yep.
Right. You don't want a high D running through your training, because they're going to machine gun that stuff right there. You got it. Come on, let's move.
Let's go.
We need to get this done because I got something else to do. But you got to understand these stages to, again, have an effective training program, protocols. And when designing a training program, it's 100% critical to take these stages into mind to make sure what you're doing is going to be effective. So many people do it like a task. I love the analogy. Many companies, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, many companies treat training like a car wash. You drive in, you drive out, you're trained. Check. How many times have you seen that in your career, Eric? We're going to treat it as we're done.
Yeah, forever, because we need to get on with business. You got to get them trained to get on with business. And there was interesting. Yeah, you get it going. It's interesting because you use the word car wash, and I had a little thought about car wash piece, about the analogy of wash, rinse, and repeat, of training, which, came into my brain right now just off the fly. But, that's really kind of coincides with what we're going to be talking about today, is understanding that you have to continue to do it till it is right. It's not a speedy thing, a drive through. You have to wash, you have to rinse, and you have to repeat in any kind of training aspect. So just funny that you said that, came in my brain. I thought it was important to talk about. So
I love that. In fact, we're going to work on that. That's a really good analogy to use, because the longer you stay in there, the cleaner you're going to come out, right? Or the more trained you're going to come out.
That's right. I mean, you use the wash. That was just magic happening live right there.
Gosh, I bet a lot of people are just blown away by that right now. So let's get into the 4 tenets of teaching. I find that damn near 95% of everybody who are training new employees These are people training employees, don't know the 4 tenets or the 4 main steps of training or teaching somebody. And so let me go through those. And you've been trained and taught your entire life this way. Think back to how you were taught in school. So first, you've got to tell them. Of course, that's training, right? The first step in training is to tell the employee what they need to know. And it's just presenting the information that the employee needs to learn clearly and concisely. And it should be organized logically and presented in a way that's easy to understand. In fact, most training organizations will write it at an elementary school level, honestly. And I'm not knocking the American workforce, but we've got to make sure that we're covering all the bases here, but it's got to be easy to understand. And so clear, concise language. You got to watch using jargon and technical terms, acronyms, because you've seen that one fly, right? The acronyms. Well, we used the ABC for the XYZ for the WXY. And the trainees just nodding their head. Yeah. Because trainees won't say, hold on there, Eric. What the hell does all that mean?
Or they'll say, don't worry, you'll get it.
Yeah. Those are famous words. Absolutely.
They are.
It's important as you're telling people to use visual aids, if it's a PowerPoint or a workbook or videos, those are all really good. And then you got to be able to break the training down into manageable chunks. And then you got to show them. So that you've told them, now you've got to show them. And so once they understand what you've told them, you got to take this step, which involves demonstrating the skills, the techniques that they're going to need to learn. And you're going to walk them through it. They're going to watch you or watch a video on how to properly follow the technique. So it's correctly done. So you got to demonstrate the skills or the techniques slowly, clearly. That's the other one too, right, Eric? They just blow. Did you get that? Right.
Good.
If somebody's been doing it for 20 years. Yeah, here, this is how you do it. You got it. Every new employee just nods their head. Yes, I got it, because they're going to be too embarrassed to tell you otherwise. You see that happen often, right, Eric?
Every time. And it goes back to the DISC assessment, right? Those folks that are an S, they'll just say, absolutely, no problem. They'll come back, what was that again?
Yeah. Or they'll go ask somebody else that doesn't know what they're doing. I don't know. What they say, what does this mean? So using visual aids again, right? We've got to get back to that. And you've got to explain everything step by step as you go. Most importantly, and this is the one thing that I remember all these years later that I learned in my original Train the Trainer class, is you've got to allow the trainee or the employee to ask questions.
Right.
Most people ask for questions the wrong way.
That's right.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. No. Good.
Nope. Rather than, what did you see? How does that work for you? How have you handled that in the past? What did you learn from that? What part of this is confusing to you? Those are the questions. That's the dialogue you've got to create as a trainer. And it's sprinkled throughout the training when we're showing them that. How many people have you ever seen really do it that way?
It's a rare breed. I mean, when you hear tell and describe and those things come out of your trainer's mouth, you're gleeful.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. You got to have a conversation. Again, we've talked about this in the past about monologue and dialogue, right? I mean, training is a dialogue at times. So it's very important that happens.
Yeah. It cannot be a one-way conversation. That's going to kill you, because the new employee's ego is at risk here, their self-esteem, and they don't want to look like a dummy. And asking questions sometimes is in people's minds looking dumb. And so they won't ask that question. And then you get ineffective results out of that person. Now, Eric, I think you'll agree that most trainers, people training people, managers training people, or other employees training new employees, they do these first two at some level. They tell them, and often they'll show them, but they don't follow these third and fourth steps in this, which
Hardly
is hardly ever. And this is where the retention comes in. This is where the training takes hold, and where you've got somebody that's really going to be able to do the job, which is you've got to have them do it. This step is allowing the employee to practice. We learn by doing, we learn by practicing, and it's got to be deliberate practice. But again, what we generally see is, okay, does that make sense to you? You think you can do that? Oh yeah, I've got that. Okay, let's move to the next thing. Rather than say, well, show me. Show me how you can do that. And this employee's got to have this hands-on kinesthetic learning. Without that, they're just not going to remember it. And I can't tell you how many times I'm trying to learn something new, and it's fine in my mind. Hell, I'm a genius in my mind. But then when these fumble little fingers start getting involved in something, I ain't so good at it. And it takes time and practice to figure it out, whether it's a new video game, a new card game, a new skill at work, a new software, whatever it is. It takes time to practice. My wife just got a new set of contacts this week, and she's tried them in the past that just haven't worked for her. She made another stab at it this week. And I remember, gosh, it's been probably 25 years ago when I first started wearing contacts. And it would take me literally an hour to get that contact in. I mean, it was so frustrating. And I'd work at it and it'd fall out, I'd stick it in, it'd fall out, I'd stick it in, it'd fall out, or it'd be crooked or something, be folded up. But in time, after I did it, I could pop it in seconds. And after doing it for so long, right? So it's like that in anything in life, and certainly at work, you've got to do it. And it's got to be provided in a safe and supportive environment. They've got to be able to take time to practice. They need to make mistakes. They need to figure out how to fix those or avoid those mistakes. And start at the simple side of things and work up to the more complex ones. Your training program has got to be designed that way. Let's start with the simple stuff and work your way up, and then offer constructive feedback and guidance. What we also see, Eric, is the trainer saying, no, you don't do it that way, or they take it away and do it for them. Say, this is how you do it. Now you do it. And now we're all embarrassed, and it ain't good, is it?
Not good at all.
No. But they need to be able to make mistakes, allow mistakes. We all learn in different ways, and whoever is training it, that may be you that's listening to this show today, allow for mistakes. And then the last tenet. So we've told them, we've shown them, now we're having them do it. Now we've got to give them feedback. Now that they've practiced, you give them time to practice a little bit and some repetitive strikes at it. You got to give them feedback. Feedback is crucial, because that's what helps the employee understand where they're doing well and where they need to improve. We don't know what we don't know. And if the person training me is not saying anything, how am I going to grade myself, Eric?
You can't. I mean, listen, it's about wash, rinse, and repeat, right? And a little bit of feedback constructively that will allow you absolutely to have continuous improvement. It sounds like a little line, but listen, you want to continue to improve, keep on going through that car wash, like you said before, keep on going through it, fail a little bit, find out where you are a little bit dirty, not really happening really right. And then it allows you to go back and get a wax on, wax off, right? As Mr. Miyagi used to say back in the day, there's no bad student, only bad teacher. Hey, Karate Kid, they tell me things, I learn. So very important.
You just prompted me. There's so many managers out there, and you and I both hear this, is, oh, it's so hard to find anybody that's smart enough to do a job anymore. Everybody I hire is big dummy. They can't get it. Right?
Right.
And never do they look at the teacher and say, well, maybe I'm just teaching them wrong. If everybody's failing, folks, might be you. Might be you. So anyway, in our experience, and that's pretty broad experience, most managers use the first two, tell them and show them, and they rarely even implement those with all the nuances that need to be included, because they think faster is better, because they got to get back to work. Faster don't work. Eric made that point clear. Rinse and repeat. All 4 tenets have got to be included. And research has shown that in order to retain information, everybody retains it differently, but they're going to retain that information dependent on how it's presented to them. So let's talk about that for a minute. If we're just told what to do, according to Edgar Dale Cone, if we're just told what to do, we're going to retain 10% of what we're told. Yeah, it's like the telephone game, right, Eric? Right? The retention of what we heard starts dissipating, getting misconstrued. So that the lecture style, the monologue style it's very efficient because I can get it done really fast, but it is very ineffective because training has to be interactive. Now, I'm going to tell them and I'm going to show them. Well, now we're getting up to 65%. When you are including visual aids, images, videos, diagrams, they're going to retain about 65%. Now, here's the important part. We've stressed this earlier. When they do it, when you give them the practice, the feedback, they're going to retain 90%. 90% when they put it into practice immediately. And that means hands-on training, simulations, role-playing, on-the-job training over time. They're not going to get it in an hour. They're not going to get it in a day. You've got to set your expectations properly. But when you tell them, show them, have them do it, give them some feedback, 90% is going to be there. And won't that be a beautiful thing for you? So keep those statistics in mind. And here's something too that I've had many of my clients do, just to make sure, especially if you're a very process-driven organization. Role play as part of your feedback, or give them a quiz as part of your feedback. Including a quiz or a test or a role play, that's going to give you a much more effective assessment of whether they're learning or not. Most people get hired on a 90-day probation. Training should last about 90 days. But if you're breaking it off into manageable chunks, you're making sure they're digested before you move on to the next chunk, you make sure that's digested. When we're trying to rush through, treat it like the car wash, get them in, get them out, move on with our lives, things are just not going to get kept. They're not going to get retained. How do I know they're retaining it? I'm going to give them a quiz. I'm going to have them show me, or they're going to, like, if it's Customer service, they're going to have to do some role plays on how we handle customer service issues. If it's sales, that sort of thing. If it's important, they know Excel. Have a role play around Excel and build a pivot table. I've always wondered what that was. I'm just kidding. So include quizzes. And in fact, in the course, once we launch it, we'll have examples of role plays and quizzes in there for you to copy for your organization.
So important.
It's so important. So you'll be able to see their shortcomings. You'll see what they've learned, what they haven't learned. It may actually help you too if you're training a lot of people repetitively where you're coming up short. If everybody's getting the same thing wrong or struggling with the same thing, maybe I need to, again, back to Eric's point earlier, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Likely you are. So include test or role plays. Now, this last part of the podcast today, I want to talk about training new hires. And, Eric, you and I alluded to this in the beginning, how many new locations with brand spanking new people. I remember when I was with Kohl's department stores back in the late 90s, and Kohl's used to, and I don't know that you and I have ever talked about this, they had a very interesting grand opening approach. They opened stores twice a year, all in clumps. So they had a spring group and they had a fall group. And so they either opened around Easter, so they had a March, April opening, and then they had around a back to school, so an August, September opening. And like when I opened Atlanta with Kohl's, and I think it was 22, 23 stores, we opened them all on the same day. Opened 23 stores on the same day. And so we had 4 brand new managers, 6 new department leads, and 150 brand new employees in each of those locations. And they were all going live on the same day. Did you know that about Kohl's?
I did. I did know that because of my
It was just
affiliation.
amazing how they pulled it off.
Yeah, I don't know how, I mean, to have that many people do something for quote unquote the first time live in different locations, that's a lot of moving parts there, Vaughn. Lots
Well, guess what Kohl's was really good at?
moving parts.
What we're talking about today.
Right.
Because like one of the most critical positions in the store, especially as an impression to a customer, was the checkout. Could they ring something up? And we practice 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 for days and days and days. Hour a day, 2 hours a day, everybody practiced on the cash register. And they spent the money, and we took the time to make sure everybody was very proficient at that part of the job. And that just is just another indication. But when we open stores, some stores open tremendously successful and some not so. But let me tell you, when they were not so, it came down to one of two things. We either had a bad manager who hired bad people, or we had a manager who was ineffective at making sure the training took place. They made other things a priority. So, again, Eric, you think back to all the hundreds of stores you've opened. What were some of the key tips that your managers, or you either trained your managers or your managers utilized? What are some of the steps that they used?
Very similar to this piece. We didn't have, through the train the trainer and all that pieces that we had folks that could do the train trainer, and also the people that were supervisors of those folks really understood that aspect and how important it was, as much as getting product onto the floor and look pretty, right? The aspect of, X and O's, which I used to call it, which is knowing how to do the ringing process, right? The customer service process, the understand what was the culture of the brand that you were showing. For instance, Kohl's, you would have to understand what was needed. You would have to understand what needed to take place on a store on a daily basis. Those X's and O's could never be compromised. Goes back to this piece. You could never compromise that piece. Yes, you might have missed a fold or to, or maybe it wasn't in the right spot or not. But those pieces, you can't, that's a foundation. It's a foundation of success for you to do. So,
You know, and 100% you're right. And as a consumer, as a customer, I'll never forget this experience. It was holiday season. I was in a FedEx store shipping some stuff to my daughter in Florida and her family. And of course, there was a line, and I had some questions. And the manager was standing next to the new hire at the cash register. Now, there was about 6 other people kind of milling and went around behind the counter doing what, I don't know. But the 2 busiest people in the store was the manager and the new employee. Now we're training them in the heat of battle. Whew. Not a good idea, right? We need a safe environment, like I talked about. But right here we are. There's a line of 15 people, and I think I was number 16. And it was going slow. You know, we all had things to do. We're looking at our watches, or looking at our phones. God, this is, you know, what the hell's going on up here? And I was watching this manager. I was watching 2 things. I was watching this manager train this new employee, and I was watching the other people, the other 6 people behind the counter. Because that you and I do that, right? We're judgy like that. And this manager saying, and the manager was pushing all the buttons on the register. You see that? You see that? You see that? You got it? Okay, good. And she'd walk away. And now this new person's up at the cash register in the heat of battle. And the next person come up, and this poor new person was trying to find what button to push. And then somebody had a question, didn't have an answer. They'd been abandoned. This new person was abandoned. This manager was back doing something else. Well, I can tell you exactly what they were doing, talking to the other 6 employees that weren't doing anything, especially not helping out the new guy. And so this new person has this look of fear on their face, and they turn around, and the manager's paying them no attention. They don't want to yell out to the manager, hey, I need some help out here. Finally, you know, this poor customer standing there, one simple question answered. This new person has no idea. It's taken forever, no support. Finally, the manager, the new employee would catch their attention. They'd come over, huffing and puffing. This manager would answer the question, walk away again. In the meantime, 6 people leaning on counters in the back. And the next customer came up, same thing, over and over and over. And I'm thinking, oh my God, please let me help you. Let me help this company. And like I made the point earlier, I've never been back to a FedEx to ship anything ever after that experience. I go to UPS because I never had that problem at a UPS store.
Yep.
So it was just terrible. I felt so sorry for that new person, but that is just a microcosm of what we see all the time, and how we just don't consider all the variables that go into training new employees.
You might even hear the worst line ever by a manager in that circumstance, where they say, I told you. I told you. And that's just, I mean, I've heard it.
Oh, yeah.
And you just so, wow. Is it, the person's like, goes down to this small.
So dumbass, don't ask any more questions.
Exactly. Forget it.
Yeah.
You'll be hiring somebody new soon.
They won't. That's when they start looking for the next job. That's where the 13% happiness or engagement comes from. But the manager, if the manager knew better, Eric, don't you think they'd be doing it?
They would.
They would. They just don't know any better. And so it's easy for me to judge somebody, but I also know that it is likely they weren't trained on what we're talking about today. So the other thing too, on new hires, you've got to have a really comprehensive onboarding program. And when it comes to new hires, it is one of the most critical things to have in place, and having a really well thought out, timely, effective first week, second week, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, all laid out day by day, week by week onboarding program. And it's not an HR program. The manager has to have an onboarding program. This isn't just watching the sexual harassment video and making sure you're signed up for all your benefits. This is a onboarding of new employees program. It's got to cover everything from company culture to job responsibilities, your job description, policies, procedures, dress code. It's a well-designed onboarding program does two really important things. It reduces the time it takes a new employee to get up to speed and to feel comfortable. And two, let me tell you, that first day, that first hour of a new employee's first day determines how long they're going to be there. Right or wrong, Eric?
Right or wrong, not right or wrong. It is right. I'm telling you right now, that's why I know you probably did this too back in the day when we had to travel to a new manager. You know, you would figure out somehow to be there on that manager's first day. Figure it out. I don't know if you had to travel Sunday, you know, on the Super Bowl Sunday or whatever. You had to be there on that Monday to start that day because it was that imperative to know that that's how important this person is to your team, your organization, and to you. I mean, that it was, you had to do it. It's the right thing to do.
Even, you know, it's kind of the rule of thumb that every new employee starts on a Monday. I don't know why. When you think about it logically, that's probably not the best day for somebody to start because that's the big administrative day. Everybody's busy. They're catching up from last week or the weekend. Tuesday or Wednesday is probably the better day of the week to start somebody, right? When the hullabaloo is not running around. Mondays are terrible. But anyway, I digress. You've got to be able to set your employees up for success. So the second thing that it prevents is when you're getting them up to speed quicker, you're getting them ingrained and engaged quicker. But the second part, if they don't have a good experience in that first day or that first week, they're looking for a new job already. They're realizing they made a mistake. And I had this discussion with a manager this past week who I was helping him understand the importance of what we're talking about right now. And they won't leave for money. They'll leave because they don't feel a part of something. They'll leave because they're not getting trained, or they'll leave because things are so disorganized, or they're just treated like a part of the cattle herd. They're not treated with respect and care and involvement and socialization. They're going to start looking for someplace to go in the first day or the first week, depending on how your onboarding program. So they'll tell you they left for more money. They will never tell you it's because I wasn't onboarded properly, because they may not even know what that means. But I've got a great tool for everybody. If you're interested in it, again, I've got it in the show notes. I've got a full course, a standalone course on getting your new employees set up for success. I've got the whole program. I've got everything you need, the checklist, the instructions, the videos on how to do it. I'm going to show you, have you do it. I'm going to give you feedback because there's assessments and quizzes in there too. I walk the talk, folks. I put a link in the show notes for you to go grab this standalone course. It's usually $98 for just $47. For listening to the Business Mechanic Show, go grab it. It is the game changer. And I'll also offer to you, if you're interested, get it, take the course, reach out to me or reach out to Eric. Our contacts are in the show notes too. And we can talk it through. If you have questions, you need further instruction, more than happy to coach you through it. Tailor this to your particular needs. Answer any questions you might have. We'll give you that for 100% of nothing, no charge. So go grab that course, $47, getting your employees set up for success. You got to focus on the foundational skills, but if you don't know what those are, how in the world are you ever going to do them? Exactly. So it's crucial. You got to focus on that. You've got to have a hands-on approach, just like Eric just described. If he was starting a new manager, like I was starting a new manager in a location, we had to be there on their first day. And usually the first 2 or 3 days, right, Eric?
You have to guide them,
Yeah.
understand that one day is usually not enough. 2 days is almost enough. 3 days is probably proper.
And then, but we'd also have a more seasoned senior manager there to help support it too, right?
Right. Yeah.
We had our troubleshooter in there supporting us. Our district manager or regional manager in training was in there too, because that was a skill they had to practice as well as getting new people set up for success.
Compounding, compounding development, always compounding.
Yeah,
super important.
It just pays off so beautifully. So you got to be there. It's got to be hands-on. You got to set clear expectations. Your training program, as part of the onboarding, is going to be described, but it's got to be structured, and it's got to be in manageable chunks over time. It can't be a 1-week training program, and then again, they're through the car wash, they're done. Tell them, show them, have them do it, let them have a little practice, and you don't move to the next until they're ready. It cannot be a predetermined time limit, because you're not going to move on until they can show you they can do it. You just can't rush through this stuff. And some people it takes a week, some people it takes an hour. And some people, and that's the reason why we have 90-day probation periods. If they're not getting it, you made a mistake, learn from it, move on, but don't keep that person on your team because they can't learn. And it's, another part that is a big part of the onboarding process that's included in the course is assigning a mentor or assigning a buddy that's not you, so that this employee has a go-to person that they can start building a relationship with, they can start getting socialized with, and is a safe person that they can be confident that it's okay to go ask questions. Because whether you believe it or not, Mr. and Miss Manager, you intimidate people because of your title alone. You may be the least intimidating person on the planet, but to a new person's mind, you're intimidating because you're the boss. So have that mentor, have that buddy in there. And then also keep in mind that and this is on, again, part of the course, have a variety of training methods. You can have hands-on, you can have job shadowing, e-learning. You need all those or a variety of those in there. And then absolutely make sure on new employees, especially in the first week, and as we're training them and we're onboarding them, they're getting plenty of feedback and especially recognition. So don't overlook the positive. Also, there was so many managers just want to catch people doing it wrong. It's essential that we're catching them doing it right. And as you're laying out your training program, you got to make sure that it's just in time training. It's got to be structured in a way as this person progresses through their training program and what they're actually going to be performing in their job expectations, that we're not training them in the first week what they're not really going to be applying for 2 or 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah.
Hold on to that, right? So it's got to be JITT, just in time training. And you're giving them the knowledge and experience or practice at the time that it makes sense. Not all in one big clump. It's efficient or effective. Effective is just in time, because you don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to get them lost. They're going to retain that information better. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. It's going to keep a good employee around. They're going to learn faster and better and deeper. They're going to get up to their learning curve, their competency curve faster. You're going to look like a hero. Stress is going to be off of your back. Wouldn't that be nice too? So listen, if you do nothing else from today's show, and we're about to wrap this up, go back and look at how you train people, evaluate your training program based on what I've shared with you today. Reach out to us if you have questions. We answer emails and and text all the time from folks. We prefer to talk to you either video chat or on the phone. We're happy to do that. We're givers, right, Eric? You're a giver.
Absolutely.
Like many of my folks have heard from me, give, never take. But reach out to us. We're happy to help you out. This is so important to your success in your career, your success as a business owner. Your future depends on this. And think about all the people you'll be impacting positively, the people you'll be impressing as new hires or your current staff. If you get this part right, this raises your level of leadership to charts unknown. So, so let's, the training approach is all about the technique. It's all about the protocol. Please take all that into account. Let's wrap this up. Eric, any final words before we send these fine folks down the road?
Just, I think repeating what we've been saying is really, it's so foundational. It's importance of really the belief of your corporation or your company of what you're doing is you have to believe it yourself. And you have to put your, money where your mouth is, so to speak. And you have to, this is so important. You'll never get over the hump without this type of approach. Really.
You'll be mired in mediocrity.
Yeah.
And frustration. So
just okay.
Yeah, just okay. We're getting by, and you're going to be struggling. Life doesn't have to be that hard if you get this part right. But it ain't easy, right? Because you've got to learn a bunch of new stuff.
You do.
You got to accept that maybe what you've been doing was not the right way. Take a change. So we'll have this out to you. Hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I hope you all gained some value from it. Thank you so much for listening to the Business Mechanic Show. Visit our website, rdltraining.com. That's Romeo Delta Lima training.com. We got a host of information on there. Read our blog, listen to more Business Mechanic podcasts, and we'll talk to you all next week.